The fortune teller read my fate, saying I was destined to become the empress, yet everyone knows the young emperor has a naive and beloved favorite. After entering the palace, he set 3 rules with me. First, aside from sharing a bed, we would stay out of each other's affairs. Second, do not lay a hand on his beloved. Third, his first child must be born to his beloved. I agreed to all of it. The emperor was very satisfied. Unfortunately, he didn't know that I, too, had a white moonlight in my heart. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. When I was 8 years old, a fortune teller came to the Prime Minister's residence, putting on a show. He calculated with his fingers and said, "There will surely be a future empress in this household." My father was overjoyed and sent him on his way. The next day, everyone in the capital knew that it was the will of heaven for the Prime Minister's household to produce an empress. Whether it was truly heaven's will or a human scheme, I do not know. After all, I was only an 8-year-old girl at the time. My father called my sister and me to him. He stroked his beard and asked us, who would be willing to enter the palace to become the empress. I smacked my lips, savoring the candy my sister had just stuffed into my mouth, and said nothing. My sister is 3 years older than me. Before we came, she whispered to me, "Awu, no matter what father says later, don't say a word." I nodded. She saw how well behaved I was and rewarded me with a piece of malt candy. My father looked at me, then at my sister, urging us to respond quickly. My sister stepped forward and said, "I'll go. Awu is only 8 years old. If she goes, she won't be able to come back." My father sighed, patted my sister's head, and said, "Good child." He looked at us with melancholy and said, "I don't want to send you to that man-eating place either," but with achievements overshadowing the sovereign. For the entire family of the Prime Minister's household to survive, we must produce an empress. Although I didn't understand what they were saying, I could see the worry on father's face. I finally realized that entering the palace was not a good thing, but I always felt that father's sorrow was rather false. Like a mask floating on the surface, I cried and hugged my sister's leg, begging her not to leave. My sister hugged me back but said nothing. The coronation was scheduled for the 15th of March, but in the end, my sister never became the empress. She died the day before entering the palace. My father, with no time to grieve, called me over. He said, "Awu, the Prime Minister's household now depends on you." And just like that, I was sent into the imperial palace in a daze. After entering the palace, Zhao Ling made a 3-point agreement with me. First, when I grow up, aside from sharing a bed, we will have nothing to do with each other. Second, I must not lay a hand on Lady Song. Third, his first child must be born to Lady Song. I agreed to everything. I might be the youngest empress in history. After entering the palace, I didn't live with Zhao Ling. Instead, I stayed with the Empress Dowager to learn the rules. After all, I was only 8 years old. No matter how beastly the emperor might be, he couldn't bring himself to lay a hand on me. The Empress Dowager and I are very familiar with each other. Because she is my aunt, she held me in her arms and carefully explained the rules of the palace to me. I listened attentively, with my hands clasped behind my back. This diligent and studious demeanor of mine made her laugh. She picked up a piece of dragon's beard candy and stuffed it into my mouth, saying with a smile, "Don't worry, Awu, with your aunt here, we'll all be just fine." Aunt couldn't intervene in matters outside the palace. But within the palace walls, she practically held sway over everything. The emperor didn't seem to like me much. He would occasionally visit me as if it were a duty, but spent the rest of his time in Consort Song's palace. I would sometimes overhear the palace servants whispering things like, "Consort Song is the true favorite of the emperor." I walked over and coughed deliberately with an air of authority, causing them to scatter in panic. I knew these rumors were deliberately spoken for me to hear. This was a test aimed at me, a test of the empress's position, and a test of the entire Prime Minister's residence. After a moment's thought, I called Xiao Dezi over and ordered him to arrest those who were gossiping. The palace maids knelt trembling, begging for mercy, but there was little fear in their eyes. After all, in their view, I was just an 8-year-old child. What thunderous methods could I possibly have? I ordered the attendants to pry open their mouths, took up a nearby dagger, and personally cut out their tongues. Cries of agony and pleas for mercy filled the air. I looked up and, as expected, saw fear in their eyes. That's good. They all know now the empress is not to be challenged. After my aunt found out, she summoned me. She happily rewarded me with a pile of treasures and said with a smile, "I was worried you were too kind-hearted. But now I see you will surely achieve great things in the future." I received the reward and returned to the palace, but at night, curled up under the blankets, I couldn't help trembling as I recalled the fearful and hateful looks in the eyes of the palace servants. I licked my teeth, the tips of which still seemed to carry the lingering taste of the malt candy my sister had slipped into my mouth. She was so kind-hearted. If she had entered the palace, she would never have been able to bring herself to strike ruthlessly. Such a kind sister, who tried to protect me and take my place to enter the palace. If she were still alive, she would surely be comforted to find that her sister was born to survive in the imperial palace. My thoughts wandered aimlessly, and before long, I drifted into a heavy, drowsy sleep. The next morning, the emperor stormed in with consort Song in tow, ready to demand an explanation. To be honest, I'm not really afraid of Zhao Ling. Any noble family that holds power sufficient to overturn the court would likely not fear the emperor very much. I consider myself quite respectful toward the emperor, not lawless like those who control the court, but the emperor clearly doesn't see it that way. He is the supreme ruler, and even the slightest lack of reverence towards him is seen as a provocation. He brought along Lady Song and said unhappily, "I heard you cut out the tongues of several palace servants yesterday." I nodded. Lady Song lowered her eyes and shed tears at the opportune moment. "Your Majesty, those were all servants I frequently use. By treating them this way, are you not slapping me in the face?" I nodded again. Zhao Ling frowned and asked me, "What are you nodding at?" I said to Song Myren, "I'm slapping your face. What makes your face so precious that it can't be slapped?" Song Myren choked up. She clearly didn't know how to respond. Zhao Ling was amused by my anger, saying, "At such a young age, you're already so vicious. If I had known, I should have let your sister enter the palace instead." I raised my head and stared at him expressionlessly. He grew somewhat uncomfortable under my gaze, turning his head away and softly comforting consort Song. "Don't cry, it pains me to see you like this." I slowly climbed off the bed, approached him, and said, "Say that again." Zhao Ling certainly did not repeat it. Clearly, what he had just said was merely a slip of the tongue. I clenched my fist and said to him, "I am the one who entered the palace today. You can wait and see if I will become even more ruthless as I grow older." The emperor left, taking the unwilling consort Song with him. I think, perhaps in this lifetime, I will never be able to win the emperor's favor like a normal palace consort. But it doesn't matter, I don't want his favor. I only want power. Even if consort Song hates me to the bone, there is nothing she can do to me. With my aunt holding the fort in the palace, it could be said to be impenetrable. I grew up safely until I reached the age of coming of age. The censors occasionally liked to meddle, handing me thick copies of women's virtues and women's precepts to read day and night. My aunt took them and burned all these books to ashes. She said with a smile, "In this palace, you can't survive by relying on these things. You need power, not kindness." I nodded deeply in agreement. Thus, everyone gradually realized that the current empress was a harsh and cruel person. I would not show mercy to any palace servant who made a mistake, nor would I allow anyone to challenge my authority. Song Myren had lived honestly for many years. Fearing that I would harm her, I did want to kill her, but not now, on the day of my coming-of-age ceremony. The emperor finally stayed overnight in my palace. He seemed somewhat reluctant. "My heart belongs only to Lady Song." I nodded, signaling him to quickly take off his clothes. "It doesn't matter who is in your heart, but I must have a child. If you won't give me one, I'll find someone else." His face turned pale, then flushed with anger, and he said furiously, "You are my empress. With whom else would you dare to have a child?" But he usually has so little authority that I feel no fear at all at this moment. I smiled and helped him take off his outer robe, saying, "Awu is not an unreasonable person. Of course, what I want most is to have a child with your Majesty, one bound by blood." Perhaps because he had never seen me smile before, Zhao Ling was stunned. He awkwardly took off his clothes and gently kissed me. "I pity you for your first time, so remember my kindness." Hearing him say that, I had some expectations. But who knew Zhao Ling's skills were so poor? I was tossed around like a dead fish and couldn't help but wonder in my heart, just how much did Song Myren spoil him? Spoiled him to the point where he was so confident in his own skills. I don't know how long I was tormented before I couldn't help but fall into a deep sleep. Zhao Ling continued to pester me relentlessly by my ear. "How is my technique, Empress? Are you satisfied?" I closed my eyes and let out a cold laugh, saying, "You should be glad I have no point of reference." Zhao Ling fell silent. I finally fell asleep contentedly. I had thought that by the time I woke up, Zhao Ling would have already gone to accompany Lady Song. Unexpectedly, he was still beside me, his heavy arm pressing down on me, sleeping like a log. I got up and called the palace maid to help me change my clothes. A rustling sound woke Zhao Ling, who covered his eyes and shouted, "Qianqian, come quickly and dress me." I knew that Qianqian was the pet name of Lady Song. Recalling how obediently he had consummated our marriage yesterday, I gently patted him and said, "Your Majesty, Lady Song is still in Jingming Palace at the moment. Would you like to go see her?" Zhao Ling froze. He seemed much more awake now, his expression looking rather dejected. What time is it now? It was his day off today, so he didn't have to attend the morning court session, and no one came to wake him up. A palace attendant nearby whispered in reply, "Your Majesty, it is past the hour of yin." Zhao Ling quickly sat up, got dressed, and rushed out. "Look in that direction, it's the palace of Lady Song." I leisurely sipped a cup of tea, not giving it much thought. The head maid leaned in and whispered, "Your Highness." In the future, the contraceptive decoction. I waved my hand, indicating that there was no need to prepare it for me. The senior palace maid bowed, preparing to take her leave. I thought for a moment and called her back. "How is the contraceptive soup at Consort Song's place going?" The senior palace maid replied respectfully, "Not a single bowl has been missed. Someone has been keeping a close watch all along." I let her leave with ease. Before long, another palace attendant came to report to me. His Majesty went to Jingming Palace, where Lady Song cried and made a scene because he had promised her yesterday that he would not spend the night at the Empress's palace. I let out a cold laugh and threw down my teacup. What does she think she is, daring to set her sights on me? I had the palace maids prepare my sedan chair to take me to Jingming Palace. Whether she is favored or not, I don't care. I only want her to behave properly and fulfill her role as a palace consort. Upon arriving at Jingming Palace, the emperor was holding his forehead, looking somewhat troubled. Consort Song sat to the side, wiping away her tears. Zhao Ling approached her, gently turning her shoulders, and softly coaxed, "Qianqian, don't cry, I'm just going through the formalities." Consort Song sobbed and sniffled, saying, "I don't care, you promised me before that you would only be with me." Zhao Ling was so anxious that he was almost ready to raise his hand and swear to the heavens. I slowly walked in, and the palace attendant announced my arrival loudly. Consort Song glanced at me, her eyes filled with resentment. I couldn't care less whether she was resentful or not. If she wants to blame anyone, she should blame herself for not having a chancellor for a father or a family that holds power. She looked at Zhao Ling pleadingly, as if unwilling to kneel in salute. Zhao Ling felt he could make the decision in this matter, so he cleared his throat, intending to exempt Lady Song from the formal salute. I glanced at him coldly, making him swallow the words he was about to say. I turned to Lady Song and said, "Kneel. Who gave you permission to stand in my presence?" Lady Song clearly did not expect the emperor's love to be so unreliable. She had thought that with this bit of affection, she could outshine the empress, but she failed to consider that behind the empress stood the Empress Dowager, and behind the Empress Dowager was the Prime Minister. And behind the Prime Minister was the general leading tens of thousands of troops guarding the border. The power entanglements of the noble families over the centuries have bound these people together, forming a colossal entity. The emperor cannot act rashly, nor does he dare to. What is love, in the face of power? It is nothing but fragile paper. If one must blame oneself for being born in the wrong era, for not falling in love with an emperor who holds great power. I, Chen Wu, am destined to laugh last and win in the end within this palace. Seeing that her tough approach wasn't working, Consort Song fell to her knees with a heavy thud, her kneecaps hitting the ground hard. Zhao Ling watched, his heart aching with distress. She sobbed and kowtowed, pleading, "I beg your Majesty the Empress to have pity on me. I only want Ailing's love and would never seek what I shouldn't. Please don't blame me, Your Majesty. Qianqian begs you, listen to this. I haven't done anything yet, I just slept with the Emperor, and I'm almost turning into a villain." Seeing the beauty in tears, Zhao Ling was naturally furious, but before he could vent his anger at me and display his imperial majesty, a palace attendant hurried in to report, "Your Majesty, the regent says he has urgent matters to discuss." Also arriving was Prime Minister Chen. I sneered as I looked at Zhao Ling, who guiltily turned his head away, not daring to meet my gaze. I had my father to back me up, but he did not. I couldn't be bothered to get entangled in such a petty rivalry, so I gave Zhao Ling a meaningful look, signaling him to quickly send her away. Zhao Ling crouched down with a headache, trying to help his Song Beauty up. "Qianqian, stop fooling around." Song Beauty also had tears in her eyes. "Your Majesty." I quietly stepped back, leaving the small space to the two of them. Matters of love and affection are truly vexing. After sleeping with the emperor, I could be considered the true mistress of the harem. After that, Zhao Ling seemed to be fulfilling a duty, visiting my palace on the 1st and 15th of every month. During these past few months, Consort Song has indeed become much more subdued. That day, after Zhao Ling left, the Empress Dowager summoned me and gave me a book on the art of the bedchamber. I felt a bit flushed, but the Empress Dowager was very serious. She spoke to me with deep concern. Don't act on petty feminine whims. What's urgent now is to quickly have a child with His Majesty. He only comes to your palace on the 1st and 15th of the month. Aren't you worried that Lady Song might use tricks and get pregnant first? I lowered my head and silently took the booklet. Imperial power and ministerial authority cannot coexist. One mountain cannot shelter two tigers. This I know all too well. The only solution is to merge the two into one. I also know the purpose of my entering the palace. As soon as I have a child, Zhao Ling can vanish from this world. For some reason, my mind inexplicably conjured up the image of Zhao Ling, that good-for-nothing who only knew how to indulge in romantic affairs, a complete fool. Yet somehow, I suddenly recalled his awkward manner in bed. I pity you for it being your first time. You should remember my kindness, and that inexperienced, fragile kiss. I must be out of my mind. I shook my head with a smile, shaking him out of my thoughts. After thanking my aunt, I took my leave. As soon as I stepped out, I ran into Zhao Ling. He stood by the bamboo grove, looking up at the sky, his demeanor surprisingly lonely. I didn't expect him to act so quickly. He had already managed to soothe Song My Ren in no time. I bowed slightly, offering him a respectful salute. When it comes to superficial etiquette, I never give anyone a reason to find fault. Zhao Ling seemed a bit sullen. Seeing me, he suddenly asked, "Wu, have you ever seen a silk tree outside the palace?" Of course I have. The old scholars believe this type of tree is too vulgar for elegant settings, so whenever a silk tree appears within the palace grounds, it gets noisily uprooted and moved away. The scene is quite a spectacle. Over time, there were no more silk trees left in the palace. My family originally had one too, but my father was once impeached because of it, with all sorts of absurd reasons like the name of this thing is obscene. What is the Prime Minister's intention? Bringing shame upon us. To avoid trouble, my father cut down the tree in the courtyard, but in truth, I really liked it. No one knows that I once met someone under the silk tree outside the mansion. I never saw him again after that, and could only think of him when seeing the tree. But unfortunately, even the tree was gone later. Coming back to my senses, I smiled and replied to Zhao Ling, "Of course I've seen it. It's not a rare plant outside the palace." "Why does your Majesty suddenly ask me?" Zhao Ling stared at me blankly, then lowered his head with a faint smile. Yet his smile was somewhat incomprehensible to me. A gentle breeze swept by, carrying his voice along. "I was just thinking about some things, that's all. The person I met under the silk tree is a secret in my heart. The young lady of the Prime Minister's residence is watched over every day, required to walk with grace and sit with dignity, but I was only 7 years old. Just at the age of being mischievous and naughty, seeing me unhappy every day, my elder sister came up with an idea. She lied, saying she was going to the shop to pick out jewelry, and had me secretly dress up as a little maid to follow her out. 2 small buns hung at the back of my head, and whenever I shook or turned, my scalp was pulled painfully. Frowning, I said to my sister, "AW's hair hurts." My sister couldn't stop laughing and told me to bear with it, so I followed behind my sister, step by step, and got into the carriage, serving her like a foolish little maid. Just before leaving, I seemed to see my parents secretly watching and smiling at me from inside the door. My sister didn't go to the jewelry shop. She took me to the village at the foot of Lingmiao Mountain. Her lover was waiting there. Although I was young at the time, I knew such things must not be discovered by others, so I volunteered to cover for my sister, under the silk tree in the rural courtyard. I was idly poking an ant nest when a boy fell from the sky. He really did fall from the sky. I had never seen anyone land so squarely on their rear end, and he even dirted my candid hawthorn, grimacing and clutching his bottom. He glared at me and growled in a low voice, "Don't you dare laugh. If you laugh, I'll cut out your tongue." I giggled foolishly. He breathed a sigh of relief, reassured. "So it's just a fool." I sniffled and retorted, "Awu is not a fool. How is that not foolish? You're not even afraid of having your tongue cut out." Although I am young, I am already well versed in the art of borrowing power from the mighty, so I retorted with my hands on my hips, "How dare you? I am the daughter of the Prime Minister's household. I'll have my father send troops to arrest you." The young man across from me was taken aback. His expression suddenly changed, turning dark and fierce, as he muttered to himself, "So you're the Prime Minister's daughter?" I ran over and hugged him tightly. "Don't even think about running away. Pay me back for my candid hawthorn." "Hey!" He was startled, flustered as he pushed me away. Later, while wiping my runny nose, he led my sobbing self to buy candid hawthorn. The candid hawthorn was very sweet. and he was very grumpy. As we walked on, the sky grew dark, and the two of us lost our way, unable to find the small village we had come from. My lips trembled, and I was about to start crying again. He then carried me on his back, walking slowly in the darkness. The 12 or 13-year-old boy was somewhat thin and frail, his bony back making me ache. I asked him, "Are we going to die here?" "I heard that ghosts wander around here at night." He stiffened all over but still stubbornly comforted me. "What's there to be afraid of, with me here? If a ghost comes, you run first. You don't know this, but ghosts only catch the ones who are running behind." I questioned, "But right now you're carrying me on your back." "So I'm the one behind, then get off my back." But I really couldn't walk any further. No matter how he tugged at me, I refused to get down and walk on my own. His back was like a small boat, swaying unsteadily, and I was the oar on the boat, moving with his rhythm. In my daze, I heard someone shouting my name, Awu. I woke up immediately and cried out, "Dad, Mom, I'm here." He suddenly set me down from his back and ran away quickly, without even looking back. I only had time to see the white jade pendant fluttering at his waist. It wasn't until my parents dragged me home by the ear that I suddenly remembered. What a pity, I still don't know his name. After all these years, I still broke this promise. From the day I entered the palace, I buried this person deep in my heart. Hearing Zhao Ling's words, my heart stirred, but Zhao Ling clearly had no intention of talking with me further. I then smiled and took my leave, giving him space to miss the beautiful song. Out of boredom, I wandered around and unexpectedly found myself in the rarely visited imperial garden. I knew there was a large silk tree in the garden, said to have been left by the regent. I had never met this famous regent, only knowing that my father spoke of him with endless praise, saying he had the bearing of an emperor and wished to form an alliance with him immediately. But the regent disagreed. He already had a woman in his heart, and my father's well-laid plans went up in smoke. I stood under the silk tree and couldn't help but laugh. Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice came from behind me. "What are you laughing at? It sounds somewhat familiar." I turned around and saw the famous regent Zhao Yi, my fingers suddenly tightening, snapping the flower in my hand. Truly, fate plays tricks on people. When Zhao Yi saw me, he was also taken aback, but he quickly composed himself. He leaned down, looking at me gently. "Have we met before?" I stared fixedly at the white jade pendant hanging from his waist. "Now, my identity is that of the empress, and he is the regent. The best outcome, of course, is to pretend to be strangers and live peacefully from now on. But I am the empress, an empress who desires to wield power alone." I lowered my gaze and replied calmly, "I suppose we haven't met. I was once the daughter of the Prime Minister's household, and now I am the empress of the inner palace." "How could I have possibly met the renowned regent?" Zhao Yi smiled. "So it really was you, the little girl I carried on my back that day." Late at night, my aunt sent a message to me. When I arrived at her palace, my aunt was bending over, gently trimming the candle wick. I knelt behind her, but she did not turn to look at me. "Ah Wu, who did you meet today?" I answered honestly. "I happened to meet the regent in the imperial garden." Only then did my aunt turn to look at me. Her expression was stern. "Do you know what responsibility you bear?" I replied calmly, "Of course I know. It's all for the lasting prosperity of the Prime Minister's residence." My aunt's expression finally softened a bit. She spoke with me for a long time, sharing intimate words, reminiscing about the deep affection she and the late emperor had shared in earlier years, and how she had managed to survive in the harem despite the challenges. Amidst her tears and sobs, she came to a conclusion. The reason my aunt could stand firm and unshaken in the harem was entirely due to the powerful influence of the Prime Minister's residence. If the Prime Minister's household is well, then I am well too. I was so moved that tears welled up in my eyes, and I repeatedly vowed that no matter what happened, I would always put the interests of the Prime Minister's household first. Only then did my aunt nod in satisfaction and see me off. Before I left, she hinted that I could make some contact with the regent. I turned around, tears still glistening on my face, but there was no sorrow in my eyes. Everything is for the Prime Minister's residence, but who is there for me? I am destined to become the empress of the current dynasty. I suppose this is the pinnacle of power I can reach. If this emperor is not suitable, then I will replace him with another. If Zhao Ling is not suitable, then there is Zhao Yi. If neither works, there are still Zhao San and Zhao Sai. Upon returning to the palace, I summoned my trusted aide and asked her to deliver a letter for me while she was out purchasing supplies the next day. The aide asked, "To whom?" I replied, "To the regent." "Zhao Yi." The aide widened her eyes in surprise. After the letter was sent, nothing happened the next day. On the third day, Zhao Yi secretly sent me a reply. It contained a sentimental line of poetry: "I will surely not betray our longing for each other." He really thought I was madly in love with him. Perhaps there was some sincerity in it, but under the weight of power, all is illusion. At night, Zhao Ling summoned me to his chambers. His skills were as poor as ever. And I even suspected that he and Lady Song had never actually slept together. Panting heavily, Zhao Ling suddenly spoke. "Oh, must we have a child? Nonsense. Once a prince is born, Zhao Ling will be of no use. But if no prince is born, the anxious Prime Minister's residence will use every means to make me bear a child. With a prince, he dies. Without a prince, I won't live well either." I pressed Zhao Ling's head down, forcing him to bury his face. I laughed and said, "Your Majesty, what foolish words are these? What couple in this world doesn't have children? You and I will surely be blessed with a house full of descendants." He knew I was lying, and I knew he knew, so we went back and forth with our false words, tussling until dawn. I always felt he was holding back anger. Yet I couldn't tell what he was angry about. Perhaps being forced to sleep with me has upset the beautiful Song. The next day, I slept until the sun was high in the sky before getting up. When I woke up, the room was dim, and someone was sitting by the bed. Zhao Yi was stroking a jade pendant with his hand while looking down at me. Seeing that I was awake, he finally showed a smile, gently stroking my face with his hand. "Awu slept until now before waking up. You really made me wait." He didn't ask why I had woken up so late, and I pretended not to know, chatting and laughing with him about everyday matters. I wasn't surprised to see Zhao Yi in the palace. The control of the rear palace was in my aunt's hands. She could make anyone appear if she wished. It was clear that the Prime Minister's residence had finally found an opportunity to climb onto the high branch of the Regent King. I nestled in Zhao Yi's embrace, exchanging many casual words with him. Until this viper finally revealed his true intentions. He said, "Awu, it pains me to see you all alone in the palace." I responded compliantly, "If your highness can rescue me from this dire situation, I am willing to bring the entire Prime Minister's residence under your allegiance." Zhao Yi was overjoyed and vowed earnestly that he would not let me down, though he mentioned that my father still seemed to be hesitating and was not yet warm towards him. I know that Zhao Yi only came to see me today because he must have already discussed matters with my aunt. The discussion was undoubtedly about the division of interests. Only after reaching an agreement would my aunt allow him into the palace to see me, intending to use me to lure Zhao Yi. Then I shall act as they wish and play the role of a pawn. But among pawns, there are both foot soldiers and generals, I said softly. I know my father well, he's always indecisive. He won't warm up to those who are eager, but insists on chasing after those who are cold to him. Zhao Yi believed it and said he would keep his distance from the Prime Minister's residence for a while. After Zhao Yi left, I lazily lay down on the bed. Lately, I've been feeling weak all over, avoiding getting up whenever possible. Since there didn't seem to be anything important to do today, I simply stayed in bed, so when Zhao Ling came to find me, he was startled to see me still lying down. He couldn't help but reach out to touch my forehead. "Are you sick?" I brushed his hand away and yawned. "Who do you think is to blame?" Zhao Ling's face flushed, and he didn't dare to meet my eyes. I can't stand his coy demeanor, so I take the initiative to ask. "No one visits the temple without a reason. What brings you here?" Zhao Ling muttered under his breath. "Can't I come see you for no reason?" I couldn't help but want to laugh. Zhao Ling always gives me the illusion that he seems to care for me deeply. I gave him a light slap, signaling him to speak his mind quickly. Zhao Ling spoke up. "I want to promote Qianqian to a higher rank." It was indeed a misconception. If Zhao Ling had any affection, it was for Lady Song. What did it have to do with me? I retorted, "No, she hasn't made any notable contributions on a daily basis. She can't be promoted." Zhao Ling grew anxious. "How hasn't she? Qianqian accompanies me every day, cheering me up. Even if she hasn't achieved great merits, she's put in hard work." I absolutely refused to agree. In the end, we parted on bad terms. As he turned to leave, Zhao Ling's figure always seemed a bit lonely. Backlit, he quietly glanced back at me. I also looked back at him. After a long while, he finally spoke softly. "There aren't many good people in the palace. Don't trust others too easily." I looked up in surprise, but Zhao Ling left lightly, saying nothing more. I savored his words and couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. Could it be that in his eyes, I'm still a little white rabbit, innocently hopping around the palace all day, only to be delivered into the wolf's mouth? Laughing and laughing, I sighed. A starved camel is still bigger than a horse. It seems the harem isn't entirely under my aunt's control. Zhao Ling also received the news that I had met the regent. I began to reconsider the situation in my mind. If Zhao Ling has a chance to turn the tables and bring down the Prime Minister's faction, should I try to show him goodwill at this moment? Zhao Ling. I repeatedly rolled these two words on the tip of my tongue. It cannot be denied that after such a long time together, the relationship between him and me was not entirely incompatible, yet this shallow affection, in the face of life and death, is as light as a sheet of paper easily torn apart with a single poke. Forget it. Let's just take one step at a time. The top priority is to secure the Prime Minister's residence. The Prime Minister's residence and the Empress's residence are ultimately not the same. I sent a message to Zhao Yi, lamenting the difficulties of life in the palace. He responded in kind, asking what troubles I had encountered. I laid out all the grievances with the Prime Minister's residence one by one. The letter stated that my father always worried that after I entered the palace, I would become estranged from the family, so he guarded against me in every matter. As a helpless and isolated woman, I struggled to make my way in the palace, fearing that I might pass away before the regent even ascends the throne. Zhao Yi was indeed deeply distressed and declared that the Prime Minister's residence had gone too far in bullying me. If I didn't mind, he offered to become my support. I then wrote another letter to my father, saying that Zhao Yi seemed to hold a grudge against the Prime Minister's residence, but fortunately, with me mediating, he was willing to share a portion of the benefits with the residents. My father wrote back, praising me for doing well, saying that Zhao Yi had indeed been somewhat distant from the Prime Minister's residence lately, seemingly trying to assert control over it. My father sneered in his letter, the regent may hold immense power, but the Chen family has endured for 3 dynasties and doesn't need to rely on his favor. Look, they all think they're extraordinary, and each looks down on the other. I'm the only one in the Chen family who's petty enough to humble myself before anyone. I suggested to my father that he should temporarily hold back his edge and make peace with the regent. Of course, my father didn't agree. He hinted that I should use tender affections to win over Zhao Yi, which is indeed a good strategy. But I'm not too willing. When things reached a deadlock, a turning point emerged. A servant from the Prime Minister's residence sneaked out at night, got drunk, and offended the regent. The regent was furious, and the Prime Minister's residence hurried to apologize. In the end, for my sake, they reluctantly reconciled. My father breathed a sigh of relief and assigned me some personnel and strategists, urging me to continue working on winning over Zhao Yi. It was a fortunate coincidence, and the outcome was excellent. There was only one thing that wasn't good. This matter wasn't arranged by me. I breathed a sigh of relief, only to feel a stifling pressure in my chest that made me dizzy and nauseous. The palace maid hurried to fetch the imperial physician for me, but after a long while, she returned with a grim expression. She leaned in close to me and whispered quietly, "Lady Song is pregnant." I abruptly stood up. I made sure she drank the medicine every time, yet she still found a way around it. No, Lady Song couldn't have done it alone. So, was Zhao Ling involved in this as well? It happened suddenly, but I couldn't rush. I still didn't know whether Song Meiren's child was a boy or a girl. There was still room for maneuver. After hesitating for a moment, I led the palace attendants straight to Song Meiren's palace. Unexpectedly, Song Meiren's quarters were completely empty, with not a single person in sight. Only Zhao Ling was sitting at the head seat, smiling as he looked at me. I calmed myself and greeted him with a smile. Indeed, she was the one held dear to his heart. Zhao Ling had protected her well. She was a fragile piece of jade, while I was a sturdy piece of tile. Now that the tile has struck the jade, of course, the precious jade must be placed in a new box. I asked, "Does your Majesty believe that I would harm Lady Song?" Zhao Ling blew on the tea in his cup and smiled. "I don't know, AW. You've always been ruthless. I don't dare to gamble." He finally bared his claws. The situation was getting tricky, and I felt increasingly dizzy and muddled. Quickly grabbing the palace attendant's arm to steady myself, Zhao Ling abruptly stood up, then pretended nothing had happened and sat back down. He asked, "Why do you look so pale? Do you really care about Qianqian that much?" I forced myself to hold my composure, not letting him see through my weakness, and retorted, "Your Majesty already knows I've always been ruthless. How could I ever let myself suffer for someone else?" Zhao Ling sat down again. He seemed to be getting angry again. "Forget it, it's not worth getting into a fight with him now. There are more important things waiting for me to do." I decided to give both Zhao Ling and myself a way out, but as soon as I stood up, I felt a wave of dizziness. Zhao Ling was alarmed and quickly stepped forward to steady me. His body was warm. Just as warm as those tender nights. Zhao Ling helped me back to the palace and hastily summoned the imperial physician. I lay calmly on the bed, my mind already somewhat clear. Heaven has indeed been kind to me. always providing guidance in desperate situations. Sure enough, the imperial physician announced with delight that I was also pregnant. I pursed my lips, trying hard not to let any joy show on my face. It's just a pity that Lady Song has just become pregnant. She hasn't had many days to rejoice, and I imagine she'll be even more restless from now on, won't she? Thinking of this, I turned to look at Zhao Ling, wanting to enjoy his unpleasant expression. But to my surprise, a faint smile curled at the corner of Zhao Ling's lips, his eyes shimmering like a pool of spring water. Only when he noticed me watching him did he retract his smile, still maintaining an inscrutable demeanor. He meticulously instructed the imperial physician on numerous details before finally suppressing his smile and taking his leave. I wonder what he's so happy about. Does he truly not worry about his beloved Song Beauty? I calculated my next move in my mind, planning to write a letter to the Chancellor's residence tomorrow, begging my father to send me more men. At this point, I had no choice but to fight. But I didn't expect Zhao Ling to act even faster than I did. The next day, as soon as I woke up, the palace attendants rushed over in a hurry. Her expression was not very pleasant. Last night, there was an unusual phenomenon in the sky above Consort Song's palace. I immediately sat up, but it was too late. Rumors had already spread far and wide, and everyone in the palace was saying that the child Consort Song was carrying would be the next emperor. For a time, Consort Song was at the height of her influence. The Prime Minister's residence hastily sent me a letter. My father wrote in the letter, "Under no circumstances must Consort Song be allowed to bear a child. Awu, I have sent you some medicine. Remember to slip it into Consort Song's food and drink. Do not be afraid, the Prime Minister's residence will surely protect you. Even if Consort Song truly loses the child, Zhao Ling would not dare to do anything to you. Is Zhao Ling truly as incompetent as the world believes?" I sat in the hall and pondered for a long time. The young emperor ascended the throne at just 13 years old, relying solely on a verbal decree from the late emperor to survive in the cracks of the court, maneuvering among the major powers. After much thought, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. No matter how much Zhao Ling has hidden, I have no other path to take. Song Meren's palace is now heavily guarded, so I can only find a way to summon her here. To my surprise, she actually came. I don't know how long she had been hiding the news of her pregnancy from us, but her complexion looked quite good, and she had lost the arrogant demeanor she had at first. When she saw me, she instinctively smiled in a flattering manner, but eventually returned to an expressionless face. "Well, she doesn't really need to worry about my opinion anymore." I asked with concern how she had been feeling lately, and Lady Song, looking deeply moved, expressed her gratitude for Her Majesty the Empress's concern and so on. After these polite exchanges, the two of us fell into silence together. The palace attendant refilled our tea, and Lady Song picked up her cup, intending to take a small sip, but suddenly set it down again. She smiled and asked me, "Your Majesty, do you now think my face is a precious thing?" Resting my chin on my hand, I replied with a smile, "Still not, Song Qianqian. If I were you, I'd keep a low profile right now." The beauty Song's face turned pale with anger. In the end, she downed the tea in one gulp, slammed the cup heavily on the table, and stormed off. "A fool remains a fool. What a waste of this fine pot of tea." After Song Mairen left, Zhao Ling came to see me. Today is the 15th, the day for his routine visit. But I wasn't feeling well, so we just lay on the bed chatting. Zhao Ling said, "After our child is born, what do you want to do?" I replied to him half-heartedly, "Naturally, to serve my husband and raise my children." Zhao Ling said again, "You're lying to me." I turned to look at him in surprise, thinking he was just spouting nonsense. Perhaps it was the deceptive glow of the amber light. But Zhao Ling looked like eyes were eyes and a nose was a nose, like an ordinary husband chatting casually with his wife. Zhao Ling said with a serious expression, "Awu, if you weren't lying to me, what would you want to do?" "Boring." I turned over again and said, "There's no need to force me to tell the truth." Fortunately, Zhao Ling didn't press further. He obediently lay down to sleep, his arm wrapping around me from behind. I don't dislike it. Actually, we lay quietly like that all night, and the palace remained peaceful. The next morning, Zhao Ling seemed especially happy. He said, "Awu, I won the bet." I drove him away. I knew what he meant, for Song Mairen to come. She must have obtained his permission, and in the end, I didn't take action against her. There were actually many reasons for not acting. Dosing someone in the Empress's palace was too conspicuous. Zhao Ling would definitely suspect me, and since we didn't yet know if the child was a boy or a girl, the cost-benefit ratio of acting now was too low. In short, it certainly wasn't because I felt soft-hearted and spared that innocent child. I am a cruel, heartless and treacherous queen who shows no mercy. I only told my father that I failed, and he grew anxious, deciding to take matters into his own hands. He chose the most foolish method, bribing a palace servant to poison someone. I've seen that servant before, greedy, corrupt, and with dirty hands. Who knows how many in the palace have fallen victim to his schemes. Zhao Ling had long had his eye on him. I just mind my own tea and never interfere. Sure enough, before he could succeed in his attempt, he was caught and brought to justice, with both witnesses and evidence present, like the fibers of a lotus root that remain connected even when broken. This led to the exposure of a whole chain of people, leaving my father and the regent utterly overwhelmed. I have received letters more than once, in which my father and the regent accused each other, both believing the other had informed against them. Because Zhao Ling was nothing, it couldn't have been him setting the trap. The cooperation collapsed easily, and to save his own life, my father had to sacrifice some people. For a time, complaints and grievances were widespread. It was the perfect opportunity for me to consolidate power. I carefully examined these people who were treated as pawns, arranging everything clearly for them. This one could be my chariot, that one could be my elephant. There are also loyal individuals who can serve as my guards, protecting the commander. Zhao Yi had clearly heard the news as well. He came over with a smile and said, "Wu, your methods are as swift and decisive as thunder, no less impressive than Minister Chen." I sighed with sorrow. I've only managed to gather a few small fish and shrimp. Without allies in the palace, I can't even sleep peacefully. My prince, I am still waiting to seek refuge with you. Zhao Yi had a sudden inspiration. Chancellor Chen is getting old and clearly lacks the strength to handle court affairs despite his willingness. It's time for the Chancellor's residence to have a new leader. I covered my mouth in surprise. Who does the prince wish to replace him with? Zhao Yi embraced me and laughed heartily. Naturally, it will be you, Wu. I don't trust anyone else. Don't worry, Wu. Consider the Chancellor's residence as an added dowry for you. Once Zhao Ling is overthrown, I will marry you as my empress, and we will work together in harmony. I was even more moved, leaning against him in pleasant surprise, murmuring words of gratitude like "Thank you, Your Highness." The teacup on the table was faintly steaming. I picked it up and handed it to Zhao Yi, saying gently, "Your Highness, please have some tea." Zhao Yi, still inspired by his own grand ambitions, took the teacup and drank it down. I smiled at him. 1, 2, 3. Zhao Yi fell down. He clutched his stomach, looking at me in disbelief. "Tea." I crouched down, gently touched his forehead with pity, and asked, "Zhao Yi, guess. Since that poison wasn't given to Lady Song, where do you think it might have ended up?" Zhao Yi's face was full of disbelief. "I have treated you well. What do you want to do?" "Treated me well," I answered him honestly. "I want military power." Zhao Yi rejected me without a second thought. Wishful thinking. "Who do you think you are? Won't you give it to me?" It didn't matter. I raised my hand, pulled the hairpin from my head, and, right before Zhao Yi's widened eyes, plunged it into his body. The sound was crisp, and it sounded wonderful. I replied calmly while continuing to prod. "Do you think all I ever wanted was to be an obscure queen? Do you think showering me with affection could ever satisfy my ever-growing ambition? Do you think, after being immersed in the political maneuvers of the ministerial residence for so long, witnessing all the back and forth, scheming for this long, I did it all just to become a queen who has to watch others' expressions?" I didn't put down the hairpin until I had stabbed him a full 7 times. Zhao Yi had already stopped moving. I gave him a light kick and urged, "Give me the tiger tally, and I'll spare your life." Zhao Yi tremblingly reached out his hand, wrote the letter to his strategist stroke by stroke, and then told me the secret code for the rendezvous. After saying that, he looked at me expectantly. I smiled faintly. "Sorry, I was just kidding." The last hairpin was thrust into his neck. Zhao Ling's hands and feet were always quick. In just a short month, my father was overwhelmed with troubles. Countless people impeached him in the imperial court. One day someone accused my father of taking bribes. The next day someone claimed he cheated in the imperial exams, and the day after that, it was revealed that my father's uncle's son kept 18 concubines in the capital. Although these 18 concubines had nothing to do with him at all, my father was furious. "Why are you dumping all this shit on me?" I sent him a message to console him. When heaven is about to place a great responsibility on a person, it first tests their resolve, exhausts their body and mind. This is only the beginning, it's just getting started. Everyone was impeaching the Prime Minister's office, and for a time, the atmosphere was tense with fear. Zhao Yi's men were very sensible and quickly analyzed that the situation had drastically changed, easily defecting to my side. Within a few days, my father was thrown into prison. I lazily let the palace attendants peel lychees for me as I listened to Zhao Ling boast about his achievements. Although Chancellor Chen has been imprisoned, I have issued an edict to sever all ties between you and the Chancellor's residence. After speaking, his eyes sparkled as he looked at me. I threw the lychee in my hand at his head. I sneered. What? Still expecting me to praise you? The Prime Minister's mansion has fallen. And next it'll be my turn, right? An unloved empress, with no noble family to back her up. How many more days do you plan to let me live? Zhao Ling's face darkened, and he stormed off in a huff. My confidant quietly advised me, the Prime Minister's residence has indeed fallen. But they were not completely wiped out. On the contrary, one branch of the Chen family has been singled out and made into an isolated loyalist. I became intrigued. Who is it? The confidant said, it's your younger brother, Chen Wei. I abruptly sat up and ordered the palace attendants to quickly dress me up, so I could go thank Zhao Ling. Rushing over in a flurry, the palace attendant at the door intended to announce my arrival, but I stopped them. Expressing gratitude for someone's charity is hardly an honorable matter. It must not be discovered by a third party. I let my trusted aide pin the palace attendant to the ground, while the guards nearby turned a blind eye, pretending not to see. In their eyes, this was nothing more than a playful interaction between the emperor and empress, not something to be taken too seriously. I rarely visit Zhao Ling's palace, and it remains exactly as it was when I first entered the palace. Not a single plant or tree has changed. There are people talking in Zhao Ling's palace. It seems it's really not a good time. Perhaps we should come another day. I intended to leave, but Song Qianqian's voice drifted into my ears. Your Majesty, will I be able to leave the palace in 5 months? I waved my hand and dismissed my confidant. Zhao Ling said, once this matter is over, you and Cheng Yu should leave. I had heard of Cheng Yu. Rumor had it he was Zhao Ling's strategist. My interest was piqued. Could it be that Song Qianqian, unable to bear the loneliness, had gotten involved with Zhao Ling's strategist? Wow, he's really magnanimous to tolerate this. Song Qianqian's voice of thanks came from inside the room. Zhao Ling comforted her. Over the years, thanks to you pretending to be my favored consort, you've won me a glimmer of hope. In a way, both you and Cheng Yu are my benefactors. I stood smiling at the door, waiting for the two of them to come out. Zhao Ling was startled. Song Qianqian froze for a moment, then immediately put on a coquettishly arrogant expression. Your Majesty the Empress, how could you eavesdrop on my conversation with His Majesty? If you're lonely, why not go talk to the regent? Alright, I'm even more convinced now. To test whether I had overheard their conversation, Song Qianqian went so far as to expose the matter between me and Zhao Yi. Just to make me lose my composure, but unfortunately, she still doesn't understand me. Zhao Ling sighed and asked Song Qianqian to leave first, leaving only the two of us in the courtyard. Zhao Ling, actually, I let you hear it on purpose. Me, don't flatter yourself. Zhao Ling snorted. Anyway, you heard it. Am I really that cruel in your heart? And you even asked me how many days I want you to live? Well, listen carefully then. Zhao Ling turned away in a huff, refusing to look at me. AWU. You better live to be 100 years old. I didn't respond to his emotional words and continued asking, you've been involved from the very beginning, haven't you? Zhao Ling descended the steps, moving closer to me step by step. He said, yes, every single thing, as long as it was for your benefit. I intervened. Awu, the person under the silk tree that day was me. First, I regret that when we met again, our positions were opposed, and I couldn't confess my feelings to you. Second, I regret that the jade pendant was one I stole from Zhao Yi to wear, which means now I can't even produce a single token to prove myself. As he spoke, he actually sounded a bit aggrieved. So, between me and Zhao Yi, who do you choose? I am quite calm and haven't been swayed by his line of thought. But now, Chen Wei's lineage has narrowly escaped and become Zhao Ling's sole loyalists. As his sister, aligning with Zhao Ling is the way to maximize our interests. The best course of action now is to reconcile with Zhao Ling. Zhao Ling breathed a sigh of relief. He was probably afraid that I wouldn't relent, insisting on remaining loyal to the Chen family even unto death. I said, I'll help you send a message to Zhao Yi, luring him in so we can execute him for treason. Zhao Ling, however, smiled. No rush. Don't you have anything else to ask me? I thought for a moment, and indeed I did. So, did you and Song Mairen ever actually become husband and wife? Zhao Ling shook his head. In fact, Cheng Yu has been planning for me in Song Mairen's palace all along. I even gave up my bed for them. I sneered. I thought so. I was wondering back then why you made it so painful for me. Now it makes sense. Zhao Ling's face turned pale, then flushed with anger. I turned and left, plotting in my mind how to lure Zhao Yi inside. Zhao Ling, however, remained motionless in place. I glanced back at him. Zhao Ling was still smiling. He said, "Wu, I will improve, ha. Who cares?" The two largest factions were eliminated, and the disciples of the Chen family also defected to Zhao Ling's side. His strategist, Cheng Yu, rose to become a prominent figure overnight. Indeed, a new ruler brings new ministers. Beauty Song joyfully packed her belongings and left the palace, heading to the Cheng residence to await the birth of her child. Overjoyed to become a loving couple with Lord Cheng, Zhao Ling felt extremely wronged. Wu, when can we become a loving couple? I didn't really feel like talking to him, so I signaled for him to continue peeling the lychees for me. Zhao Ling obediently kept peeling. For a moment, the hall fell silent. He knew why I wasn't responding, and I knew why he was silent. Relying on Zhao Ling was a gamble I won, but I never truly became a commander, and this shallow affection couldn't make me bow down in genuine submission. Perhaps Zhao Ling and I will spend the rest of our lives in mutual suspicion like this. The night had grown quite late, and I reminded Zhao Ling to extinguish the candle for me. The room instantly went dark, and Zhao Ling was still lying beside me, holding me from behind. It felt both comforting and like a cage. In my drowsiness, I heard Zhao Ling speaking. Wu, you used to laugh a lot when you were little, I said. Go to sleep now. Zhao Ling lowered his head and kissed the tip of my hair. But Wu, it's been so long since I've seen you smile. Drowsiness washed over me, and I mumbled vaguely to him, maybe tomorrow, I will learn to smile. Only then did Zhao Ling fall asleep contentedly. I opened my eyes in the darkness, looking at him coldly. Perhaps in Zhao Ling's heart, no matter how much I scheme, I am nothing but a short-sighted woman. He thought that by treating Lady Song this way, I would believe that she truly had nothing to do with him. And then, once Lady Song left the palace, she was beyond my reach. Her child would surely grow up safe and sound. How laughable. He actually thought I truly believed his lies and was willing to be a loving couple with him, and he attempted to envelop me with a net called favor, turning me into a cat with its claws and teeth removed. How dare he look down on me, thinking that I, Chen Wu, am such a weak person. He was wrong. That night, I didn't sleep a wink, my anger swelling in my chest. Zhao Ling did not know that the reason I spared Lady Song's life was for no other purpose. It was only because I could not determine whether my child would be a boy or a girl. If it were a boy, then so be it. I had thought that if it were a girl, I would snatch Lady Song's child and raise it as my own, ruling from behind the curtain as the sole authority in the shadows. But I suddenly realized I was wrong. Whether a boy or a girl, they are all my children, Chen Wu's children. I want her to be well, so she will be well. Because I was born as the eldest daughter of the Chen family, I was used and manipulated. Should I do the same to my own child? Ever since we confessed our feelings, Zhao Ling has acted as if he deeply loves me and me alone, but I know he still has a secret guard under his command, who reports to him daily about Lady Song's situation. Yet in the palace, he plays his role to perfection, pretending to trust me completely. I know what he's waiting for. He is waiting for the day when I fully trust him, so I will hand over my military authority to him. I put a little something in his tea every day, the dosage so subtle that even the royal physician couldn't detect anything amiss. Zhao Ling joked to me, perhaps it's because Wu is too alluring. I can't control myself day after day, and lately I've been feeling a bit of back pain. I nestled into his arms and said shyly, don't say any more, I'll let you off today. Lies. I even took medicine today. I endured until the day of delivery. Zhao Ling still hadn't given up on creating a spectacle. He pretended to look into the distance and exclaimed in feigned surprise, looking in that direction, it seems to be Chengyu's residence. I suppose Song Qianqian has given birth. Who would have thought the sky would be ablaze with radiant light? I nodded weakly, holding my daughter in my arms, so small, yet stubbornly pursing her lips, that defiant look so much like me. I called out to him softly, Your Majesty, why don't you look up at the sky? Zhao Ling looked up in confusion. Above the imperial palace, a phoenix made of flames was soaring, reborn from the ashes. He suddenly turned around, gritting his teeth as he glared at me. Was this your doing? I wiped the sweat from my forehead and revealed a satisfied smile. I asked him, now that everyone in the world has seen the omen, Your Majesty, what do you think? Over these past few months, Zhao Ling had no idea just how grand a scheme I had secretly laid out, all thanks to his trust. The Zhao family are all fools, overly confident, believing that a woman would truly abandon power for love and willingly submit to another. How could I be willing to do what none of them were willing to do? The confidant walked in, holding a knife and standing beside me, glaring fiercely at Zhao Ling. Zhao Ling desperately tried to call for his hidden guards to protect him, only to despair when no one responded. I've played games with him for several months, it's time to collect some payment. I stood up, the sunlight falling on the child in my arms. She was so innocent, untouched by the world's rules and discipline. Zhao Ling was pinned to the ground, unable to move, while the others knelt, not daring to look up at me. To observe, in fact, is also a form of power. I close my eyes, quietly savoring this moment of silence. After a long while, I finally face the sun and open my eyes. I've decided, my daughter will be named Chen Zheng, not the zither that is merely admired and played as an instrument, but the unyielding, iron-willed kind of resilience.